Take a network break. I'm Drew Conry Murray.
And I'm Tom Hollingsworth.
John Johnson is away, so Tom is delivering today's virtual donuts. You did bring the virtual donuts, right?
I did, and they are calorie-free this time because we got the deduplicated virtual donuts.
Excellent. All right, well, help yourself to one. And before we get into the news, just want to mention that you can stick around after the news for a sponsored Tech Bytes podcast. We're talking about Internet Performance Monitoring, or IPM, with Catchpoint. Catchpoint IPM helps you understand the performance of your SaaS and cloud apps, WAN and branch connections, and more. And we're going to talk about how Catchpoint can enrich network monitoring with synthetic transactions so you get critical visibility into application performance from the user perspective. And don't forget, we've got merch, a dozen podcasts you can subscribe to, an industry blog, 2 weekly newsletters, a community Slack group, a YouTube channel, an IRC group, and more. You can find it all at packetpushers.net. It's all free, no login required. And if you have any comments, corrections, or critiques after this episode, you can hit us up at packetpushers.net/FU. All right, let's dive into some red alerts. First up, Broadcom's VMware has issued updates to VMware ESXi, Workstation, and Fusion to address several critical vulnerabilities that allow code execution by malicious actors with local admin privileges. There is a known active exploit for one of the vulnerabilities, so links in the show notes if you need to go step away and take care of that. The other red alert for today, Cisco is warning customers that Webex for BroadWorks can let unauthenticated attackers get remote access to credentials. And if you're not familiar, Webex for BroadWorks integrates Webex video conferencing and collaboration tools with BroadWorks UC platform. Cisco says in a recent security advisory that it's already pushed a configuration change to address the flaw and has advised customers to restart Webex to get the fix. Again, links in the show notes if you need to take care of that. Let's switch to news. SolarWinds has acquired an incident response company called Squadcast for an undisclosed amount. Squadcast competes with the likes of PagerDuty and OpsGenie, providing a platform for on-call alerting and incident response management. I guess the idea is to marry SolarWinds monitoring capabilities with Squadcast platform so you can speed up troubleshooting and meantime to repair. SolarWinds says Squadcast can isolate critical alerts and provide the collaboration capabilities to support incident response, and Squadcast integrates with Teams and Slack. Any thoughts, Tom?
I think this is a smart move on behalf of SolarWinds, and there's one reason why. Look at every other platform that's competing against SolarWinds, and what 2 words do they use all the time? Alert fatigue, right?
Right.
You need to be able to figure out when things are being exploited. You need to figure out what your critical vulnerabilities are, and you need to know how to prioritize the people that you've got. Because let's be fair, if you're investing in a tool like this, you probably don't have staffers coming out of your ears to fight these problems. I think having the intelligent reporting capability is critical for modern organizations. And let's be honest, SolarWinds is kind of at a point now where they need to kind of add those things via acquisition. I don't know. I haven't heard a lot out of them recently. I know that they're still recovering from other things that have happened in the past. So maybe this is a good move overall for them. They kind of get some new code base ideas in there, some fresh developer faces. They figure out how to make these things work together. Because if not, I mean, are the up and coming companies going to start eating their lunch?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and I'm sure SolarWinds is thinking about it. I do agree that adding an incident response platform, if you're already doing your observability or monitoring and things come up, it makes sense to be able to shunt that right into an incident response platform. Anything you can do to streamline it makes sense. And yes, SolarWinds does need something to get people not thinking about that thing we don't talk about in the past. Moving on, Aviatrix has announced a Kubernetes firewall offering. It's designed to provide security and visibility within and across Kubernetes clusters. Aviatrix says this firewall provides a common platform for hybrid cloud and multi-cloud deployments. It also provides NAT capabilities to address the problem of overlapping IP ranges between Kubernetes clusters.
Kubernetes is the way that everybody is going with everything now. So a lot of your development that you're going to have to be dealing with is going to be focused specifically on getting that to work the way that we want it to. So when you look at the pedigree of what Aviatrix has been doing over the years, to me, this is just an outgrowth of things. But the important thing is that because they're aiming this at Kubernetes, it means that it can run across anything, right? Like you're not locked into using AWS services to do this. You're not locked in to using GCE services for this. So that portability is going to be huge because you know that multi-cloud is going to be like a huge part of this. And I remember when multi-cloud conversations first started happening and everyone's like, oh yeah, we're going to do arbitrage and we're going to make this go over here and that go over there. I'm like, yeah, but if you're dependent upon a service in another cloud, it's going to break as soon as it moves. And you could just kind of see like the dawning on their faces. They're like, oh, yeah, we never thought about that. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen this push to finding, standardized constructs like Kubernetes. I'm glad that someone is finally figuring out that maybe we need to start putting some guardrails in place. Just we've got to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is going to be compatible with future releases of software like this.
Yeah, I think it aligns with Aviatrix's broader goal of providing that uniform operating environment for multi-cloud networks. As you noted, folks might think, well, we're just going to use one cloud, but then a developer starts a project in another cloud, or you acquire a company, or a partner comes on board, or whatever, and suddenly you're a multi-cloud shop. So having that uniform operating environment makes sense, and Kubernetes is a very smart extension for them, so it makes sense to me. They also note that it can enforce security policies for VMs as well as containers and provide some encryption for traffic that's going from on-prem to cloud deployments. Moving on, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, better known as TSMC, has pledged to spend an additional $100 billion in the U.S. This is coming on top of an existing pledge of $65 billion. The chip maker unveiled plans for 3 more fabrication plants, 2 advanced packaging facilities, and a major R&D center here in the United States. That's what this money is being allocated for. Of course, construction timeline and facilities locations haven't been announced. TSMC said its U.S. investment is likely to support 40,000 construction jobs over the next 4 years and more than $200 billion in indirect economic output in the U.S. over the next decade. Of course, those numbers are made up until they actually happen. And again, $100 billion is a lot of money, but is at the moment just a pledge, not the same as cash in hand.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of discussion about how much actually gets done. And we've seen this before where some of the plans that were put out by other companies were scaled back significantly once, they took into account things like real estate cost or suitability for building a facility. I will say, though, building it in Arizona is probably about as good as you're going to get. You don't have to worry about, little things like earthquakes all the time.
Right.
The other thing for this being specifically with TSMC is this is kind of a hedge because, as we know, most of TSMC's facilities sit in Taiwan, and that is a global hotbed for potential conflict.
Yes.
And I was telling somebody about this literally last week. Like, the first thing that happens if there's ever going to be an invasion or a war is that TSMC's facilities over there go away. Like, they've already said that is going to happen. They will raise those facilities to the ground to prevent them from becoming a strategic bargaining chip, basically. And I think by moving some of those facilities to the U.S., it's a smart move. But at the same time, if 50% of your semiconductor manufacturing facilities are in a quote-unquote safe country, does that impact the possibility of defense pacts with the island of Taiwan? Well, if you guys are going to have to move over here anyway, if you get invaded, why don't you just move everything over here?
Yeah, so there's a blog in the show notes you can check out, but it definitely raised that issue. That this move by TSMC raised some eyebrows in Taiwan itself because there is this sort of implicit semi-spoken, semi-not-spoken guarantee from the U.S. and the West in general that one of the reasons we're going to protect Taiwan, yes, it's a democracy in the region and we want to support it, but also we depend on these semiconductor manufacturing capabilities for basically our modern economies. And if they go away, we're screwed. So TSMC is essentially, they call it the Silicon Shield in Taiwan because it is, there's a cold, clear economic reason for Western countries to protect Taiwan from China if an invasion should ever happen. So with manufacturing capabilities coming to the U.S. or off of the island, it does raise concerns for the people in Taiwan. The other thing, again, it's a huge pledge, a huge amount of money, but we'll see what actually happens. As you said, Tom, promises get made and then they don't always get kept in the long run as facts on the ground materialize. But interesting that there is this huge effort to reshore manufacturing of chips and semiconductor development here in the U.S. So in that regard, a good move for us. Sticking with the U.S. chip production, however, President Trump says he wants to kill the CHIP Act. That was bipartisan legislation from the Biden administration that has pledged $52 billion in U.S. government subsidies, grants, and tax breaks to help revive domestic chip production. Subsidies are awarded to companies including Intel, TSMC, and Samsung, who are then investing additional billions to build facilities in the United States. Funding is distributed over time and based on milestones achieved by the recipients. So far, more than $32 billion in grants have been dispersed. It's not clear if Trump wants to try to claw that back or halt further disbursements. Intel, Micron, Samsung, and TSMC are just a few of the companies that have received funding, and for those companies, it's been billions of dollars already.
I worry about this because we've already seen that Intel has delayed the opening of their Ohio facility for at least a couple more years because of their financial straits right now. And a lot of their I don't know, outlook was based on CHIPS Act funding.
Yep.
And now we're seeing this. So at its core, is this a political move to force people to come back to the negotiating table? I don't have that answer. I don't work in politics for a reason. But what I really hope this is not an opportunity for someone to attempt to renegotiate every one of these deals individually to score brownie points with people, only for them to come out worse in the long run. Because as you said, this was bipartisan. The one thing that we got the Congress from the last couple of years to agree on was that we needed to invest more in bringing these facilities into the U.S. And we've seen that, right? Intel has agreed to build more facilities. TSMC has agreed to build more facilities. And yes,
Samsung
they just
agreed, yeah.
Yeah, TSMC just agreed to $100 billion of investment. Do you think they would have done that if the CHIPS Act hadn't started that process?
Right.
I would argue no.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on the one hand, I'm uncomfortable with the, federal government giving grants and subsidies to industries, private industries that are making money. But on the other hand, it does make sense technologically, globally for the U.S. to restart advanced chip making capacity here in the U.S. So yeah, I'm fine. I think it is actually an investment that will pay long-term dividends. The other thing is it's just really bad for business if you make an agreement and then start to renege on it. It creates uncertainty. It makes you look like a bad actor. It makes companies less willing to do the hard, long, years-long work to get these kind of facilities and processes up and running. I think the one thing that gives me a little bit of hope is that Congress was very smart in the way they laid out this bill. There's a link in the show notes about how this money's being distributed. It's happening all over the U.S., from California to Massachusetts, with companies getting millions or in some cases billions of dollars, which means there are congressional districts where people are seeing jobs and money and investment, and that tends to focus Congress people's minds. So my hope is that Trump by fiat won't be able to kill this because there is actual money going into communities that want it and need it.
And one more point I'll add here is that a huge component of the CHIPS Act was about creating education subsidies for people to skill up to do these kinds of things. Because something that was pointed out on an episode of Packet Pushers years ago was the fact that one of the reasons why Taiwan is such a huge hotbed for chip manufacturing is because they basically have a pipeline from university directly into TSMC. We don't have that pipeline here in the U.S. Right. It's one of the reasons why TSMC has been hesitant to build over here is because we don't have enough skilled workers in this area. And I think that without the CHIPS Act forcing those subsidies to happen, that you're opening yourself up to one of the things that people were worried about in the first place, which was, well, if we're going to build a facility over here, we're going to import our people over here because they're the only ones that know how to work on it.
Right.
And the uplift of jobs for people in the area actually won't be there because they're not capable of working on the facility.
Right. But that's, again, part of this, you have to think of this as a years-long investment, meaning that there is now incentive for local universities and community colleges and stuff to begin training folks for this kind of work. So it has a beneficial effect of spurring not just giving us more chips, but also boosting educational facilities and capabilities here in the U.S. for the long term. So hopefully we can recognize that and not kill this. Plenty of links in the show notes if you want to do some reading yourself. We will move on. Microsoft is shutting down Skype. The company said the service would no longer be available starting in May 2025. When I heard the story, I was like, oh yeah, Skype. It's one of those things where it's like you're sort of an old high school friend where you hear about him and you're like, oh yeah, I like that guy, but haven't been in touch in a long time.
It is. And when you look at the fact that Microsoft has effectively transformed what Skype was into what Teams is, I mean, if you're thinking, oh yeah, Skype for Business, kids, that was 8 years ago. Like that's how long ago we're talking about. Skype is one of those pioneers of the internet, right? Like the reason why we are where we are is because Skype laid that groundwork. But I think that ultimately what killed Skype was the pandemic. And the reason for that is because we stopped doing audio calls. If we were still doing audio only for everything, Skype would still have a place in the consumer market. But when we shifted to video over the pandemic, Skype did not catch up. And I have lots of good memories. I have a lot of bad memories too. But it's time for this to kind of get sunset, right? And Microsoft is basically keeping the brand name alive for no reason. So this is smart because they have effectively branded Teams as their setup. And why maintain it? I mean, somebody the other day said, "Oh, well, how do you want me to get a hold of you? Do you have Skype?" And I'm like, "No, because I don't live in the early 2000s."
Right. Do you want to send me a carrier pigeon? Looking at some of the reporting on this, Microsoft acquired Skype back in 2011, and I was like, that is so long. That's like 100 years ago at this point, to 2011. They acquired it for $8.5 billion, which at the time was Microsoft's largest acquisition. They have since blown well past that. But yeah, Skype was definitely, it was one of those companies that actually like the name became a verb, which is an achievement. But as we've seen with things like Xerox and stuff, that doesn't always last forever. Moving on, sticking with Microsoft, they're warning that a group of Chinese hackers labeled as Silk Typhoon is targeting the IT supply chain, including remote management and monitoring services, privileged access managers, and managed service providers. By compromising these targets, attackers can then pivot to customers being serviced by these providers. Microsoft says a typical pattern is to steal API keys and credentials and then leverage those to penetrate further into an organization and escalate privileges. Other tactics include password spraying and password reconnaissance. Tom, any thoughts?
Silk Typhoon, from the same people who brought you Salt Typhoon, which we're still dealing with and possibly going to have to spend billions of dollars to literally perform exorcisms on all of that equipment. Mm-hmm. This tracks with what we've been seeing. I know that a lot of us that listen to this podcast probably grew up in the heady days of the internet when it was all about defacement and all that other stuff. Yeah, those people don't do that anymore. The Captain Crunches of the world are retired, and this has become a business, and in some cases, nation-state intelligence gathering capability. And when you've got a group like this that's probably backed by a nation-state, what are they looking for? They're looking for footholds, and that's what they've gotten. And when you look at the timeline of attacks here, Microsoft is one that has been embarrassed a lot over the last couple of years because people got access to stuff that they really, really shouldn't have. And that allows them to gain massive footholds. Mm-hmm. And once they do that, it means they can collect all the information coming out of there. I mean, one of the groups drained email accounts of executives. Like that is a penetration on the worst order because they get to see everything at strategic level. And if this group, if it has some of the same people from Salt Typhoon, they were very, very embedded in those systems. And we're still finding out. We still get news reports on a regular basis. Like, oh yeah, they had compromised so many people's phones. Right. You're like, maybe we need to do a better job of locking this stuff down. And the idea of if you accidentally hit publish on a GitHub update that has an API key in it, there is no amount of time that key can live out there before it's compromised. There literally are bots scanning constantly for API key signatures, and they'll steal them, and they will then either hold them, or you'll get a $10,000 AWS bill next week. And so as soon as you hit publish, no matter what, you have to invalidate that key because it is gone. And that's the people that we know that are making a lot of noise about it. These Typhoon groups don't make a lot of noise.
Right. And yeah, this is not a smash and grab. This is long-term burrow in, implant, monitor, watch, wait, and then do what they need to do at some point. Yeah. Yeah. So, and the other reason, again, because they're attacking third-party service providers is because once you compromise that, then your entire customer base is also open to you. So if you are a customer of some kind of, third-party IT service, you may want to arrange a time to talk to them about things like their AP security, password management, and so on, because it is a good time to have that conversation. We'll wrap up with some financial news, starting with HPE. They announced results for the first fiscal quarter of 2025. Revenues were $7.9 billion, up 16% year over year, with net earnings of $627 million. By business unit, server revenue was $4.3 billion, up 29% year over year. Intelligent Edge, which includes Aruba, brought in $1.1 billion, down 5% versus last year. Hybrid cloud revenues were $1.4 billion, up 10%. CEO Antonio Neri said it's the fourth consecutive quarter that revenues were up over the previous year. However, he also said, quote, "We could have executed better in some areas," which I take to be aimed at the Intelligent Edge business unit, which was down.
I wonder how much of this is being driven by people that are going AI crazy, because this to me feels like, when you turn around 3 years ago when everybody wanted to buy network upgrades because now's the time to do that. And we saw a lot of pull through on the networking side. And now you're judging today's networking revenues against some of that stuff. And then you've got, oh yeah, we've got to have these bigger, faster, better servers to run all of this ridiculous AI, GPU, inferencing cluster stuff. Is this sustainable? And I don't have an answer for that. If I did, I'd probably be sitting on CNBC right now giving this report. But I think that HPE is hoping that it's going to sustain a little bit longer because, yeah, while Wi-Fi 7 might be driving some infrastructure upgrades, I don't think that it's the killer app right now because there aren't a lot of devices that support it. I mean, Apple literally just released a brand new set of devices this week as we're recording this that don't have Wi-Fi 7 capabilities. I don't think that customers are going to actively choose to pick a different device based on the Wi-Fi radio that's in it. But the enterprises that are just consuming servers as fast as they can get them out the door, the ones that are choosing which hybrid cloud model to adopt, they're looking for that long-term kind of solution for the workloads that they want to be running, which, right or wrong, right now is AI. So HPE is going to make money for now, but two things could happen. One, bottom could fall out of the market. We've seen that before.
Yep.
But the other thing is that if the moves from companies like NVIDIA to kind of lock people more into that ecosystem or to only partner with very specific companies on making server architecture that are non-competing kind of, shift the way the market is moving, I think that what ultimately could happen is companies that were kind of betting on getting some of that trickle down might find themselves a lot more parched than they might have wanted.
Yeah, I am pretty comfortable saying that, HPE's results are entirely driven by the AI infrastructure boom. It's that rising tide that's lifting all boats, but tides go out. So this time next year, it's entirely possible that all of these companies that we're talking about today will be telling a very different story. And that's sort of this is the musical chairs game that's happening right now on Wall Street and in the investor classes. When does this boom stop? When is the gold rush over? And everybody is like sampling the air for little signals to try to give them a clue. Right now, it seems like things are okay. But again, these results are the past. We don't know about the future. So that is the game. One other notice, a trial date has been set. It's July 9th for HPE to plead its case to overturn a Justice Department complaint that has blocked HPE's acquisition of Juniper Networks. And I kind of wonder that not great result in the Intelligent Edge business unit. My assumption is, the uncertainty of what is going to happen with HPE, what is going to happen with Juniper may be keeping people from wanting to invest in either of those platforms or portfolios at this time, which is not great because Wi-Fi 7 is out, it is driving sales, and that is potentially lost opportunities for HPE that they won't get back. Moving on, Zscaler also released results for the second quarter of 2025. Revenues were $647.9 million, up 23% over last year. Net income, however, was a loss of $7.7 million. The cloud security market right now is in a growth mode. I think that's reflected in the revenue results, but I think Zscaler needs to do something perhaps on the cost side to get that net income back into the positive.
Yeah, cloud security companies are going to be making a lot of money as of late because people are starting to realize that they're going to have to start, making something about this. And Zscaler is the quintessential SSC company, right? Like, we're going to offer you these security things without actually having to sell you the hardware to do it. There's a little bit more leg here, I think, ultimately. Zscaler is becoming synonymous with this kind of approach to things. Because a lot of companies are kind of sprouting up and their first line is, we are the competitor to Zscaler. Mm-hmm. Like, if you are the gorilla in the market, what can you say? So the thing, of course, that always cracks me up is revenues were way up, but we still lost money this quarter because the net income went down. Does that mean that you're spending too much money on marketing? Does that mean that your sales force is a little too aggressive? I've never figured this out because I don't know about you, Drew, but when I went to B school, the ultimate goal was to turn a profit every quarter.
That's old school thinking, Tom. It's all about just, spending money and owning a market. So I don't think that Zscaler has done that. I would guess that, you could, if you dug into the results, there would be things there. With SSE, they've still got to buy capacity. They've got to be in POPs all over the world. They've got to be able to scale out to meet customer demand. That's expensive. And there's probably a lot of demand for servers for other things right now. So Zscaler is probably spending a lot on infrastructure to manage the growth that they're getting from revenues. And that maybe they've still got to find a way again to actually extract income from that growth. So that's the trick. Moving on, Marvell, they sell switch ASICs, including ASICs targeting hyperscaler and AI markets, as well as things like Ethernet PHYs, co-packaged optic DPUs, and fiber channel gear. They announced their results for Q4 and full year fiscal 2025. For their quarter, revenue was 1.8 billion, up 27% year over year, and a record for the company. Net income was 200 million. For the full year, revenue was 5.7 billion with a net loss of 885 million. The bright spot was definitely Marvell's Q4 performance. Marvell is forecasting revenues of 1.8 billion for its next quarter, which would continue that performance. However, after the report came out, Marvell shares dropped nearly 20%. Analysts were expecting a higher forecast, and Reuters notes that investors are worried that the demand for GPUs and related AI infrastructure is falling off. Again, echoing my earlier comment about everyone trying to sample the wind to find out when the AI gold rush is ending.
Exactly. And unless you're NVIDIA, everybody sees that eventually it will end, right? NVIDIA is going to ride this horse until it falls apart, and then they're going to staple some 2x4s to it and ride it a little longer. Marvell is probably trying to be a little bit more conservative here because, unfortunately, right or wrong, most people are now equating NVIDIA with the AI gold rush, right?
Yep.
You're going to buy Haswell, you're going to buy their GPUs, you're going to buy NVLink, you're going to buy Spectrum X, you're going to buy Bluefield. Like they want to be the one-stop shop for everything. If you remember back to Blade servers, like we want to own the whole rack. And Marvell is parting a lot of this stuff out. So yeah, while there's an upswing in their Q4, which kind of gave them a bright spot, like what are you looking forward for the next 12 months? Is the surfing the wave going to actually pay off? Or is it going to be is it going to be a situation where companies are going to start scaling back because they don't know what to do with the inferencing and AI stuff that they've got? And Marvell has to be very careful because, if they make too much stuff to go into those things, they're left holding the bag if nobody wants to buy it. They can't repurpose their stuff for the consumer market like NVIDIA has been trying to do.
Right. Yeah, for sure. This is, Marvell's great opportunity, particularly as a switch ASIC maker, with companies looking to buy white box switches to build out that front end and back end fabric for running all of their AI workloads. This is an opportunity for Marvell to break in and maybe take some market share for Broadcom if it's ever going to happen. So the next few quarters, I think, will be very interesting for them. And speaking of Broadcom, this is our last financial result. They announced financial results for their first fiscal quarter of 2025. Revenues were 14.9 billion, up 25% year over year. Net income was 5.5 billion. By sector, its semiconductor business unit brought in revenues of 8.2 billion, up 11% over last year. Software revenues, which include VMware, were 6.7 billion, up 47%. So good job, Broadcom, diversifying.
Yeah, Broadcom's always going to have like a consistent software portfolio because they're going to be acquiring new companies and adding to it. They need to diversify into their hardware business. And the question that I have, based on some of the things that I've been seeing, and we'll know more at GTC in a couple weeks, is what happens when the market that you're trying to break into, the AI networking market, closes up? I'm seeing some things that make me wonder if they're trying to go to a model where DPUs are kind of critical to the way that those fabrics operate. And when we talked to Broadcom, I think it was last year, about Ultra Ethernet, they're like, oh yeah, you don't need to use GPUs with our Ultra Ethernet. So then what? Like if everybody else is saying you have to run a DPU in order to get all these advanced super features, and Broadcom kind of doesn't make those right now, how's Broadcom gonna make that work? But the answer, of course, will be let's sell some more VMware licenses, right? Let's just make sure that we're pushing the software as much as we can. But again, like we talked about in the last story, when does that wave kind of die down, right? Like we've already heard a lot of pushback in the community from people who are like, I'm stuck with VMware for the next year or so because of the contract that we signed, but I'm significantly invested in finding an alternative if the prices are going to keep going up. I don't have a good answer for people who are wondering what to do next, other than, go figure out what you need and how you can get away from things that you don't like, and is it going to sacrifice any quality or not? Broadcom's going to have some hard conversations pretty soon about, do we continue to try to diversify into a market where, we're kind of the arms dealer for everybody who's not NVIDIA, or do they just kind of jump in with both feet and say, we'll sell it as long as we can and then buy another company in 2 quarters to boost revenues again.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to position them as sort of the alternative to NVIDIA if Broadcom wants to make investments in DPUs. I think that would be interesting. Right now, they're having great success on the ASIC side of the house. And so maybe that's less of a concern. As for VMware, they were very clear from the get-go, prices are going to go up. You can pay them or you can leave. And they've stuck to their guns. All right, that wraps up the news portion of the show. Again, links in the show notes if you want to get more details on anything we covered. Tom, where can folks find you online?
The easiest thing to do is actually head over to Blue Sky. I'm networkingnerd.net over there. I've been doing a lot more posting as of late. I'm still writing here and there and everywhere. And of course, my Bruce Wayne job is Tech Field Day. We've got a networking event coming up, of which Drew will be a part of.
I will.
And we're very excited to have some really cool presentations there on March 19th and 20th. techfieldday.com for more details. And I can't wait to get into the meat of some of these great conversations.
Yeah, there is a lot of great content over at Tech Field Day across a variety of disciplines, networking, cloud, security, storage, where vendors are giving deep dive technical presentations in front of technical people who are interrogating them about those presentations. So go check it out. Lots of good learning opportunities there. I'm Drew Conry-Murray. I'm also on Blue Sky at DrewCM and blogging at packetpushers.net. Please stay tuned for our Tech Bytes conversation with Catchpoint talking about IPM and synthetic transactions for better visibility. It's coming right up. Today on the Tech Bytes podcast, we talk about Internet Performance Monitoring, or IPM, with sponsor Catchpoint. Catchpoint provides visibility across the full internet stack to help you understand the performance of your SaaS and cloud apps, WAN and branch connections, and more. We're going to talk about how Catchpoint can enrich network monitoring with synthetic transactions that provide critical visibility into application performance from the user's perspective, and that's key. We welcome back guest Leo Vasilou, Director of Product Marketing at Catchpoint, who joined us for a Tech Bytes recording back in February. Leo, welcome back to the podcast. So just for a refresher, what is Internet Performance Monitoring, IPM?
Well, first, thank you for having me back. It's an absolute pleasure. And to the question, what is it? Well, here at Catchpoint, we like to say the internet is your new network, and that a reliable, resilient internet stack that delivers your digital products and services is business critical. And so Internet Performance Monitoring, or IPM, is all about giving orgs the visibility into those internet stacks. And what does that do? Well, we believe the main thing it does is reduce the frequency, duration, and impact of incidents.
What do you mean by internet stack?
Think of it like this. You've got an application stack that's used to create your products and services, or sometimes we'll say experiences. Mm-hmm. The internet stack is what takes the handoff and actually delivers it to users wherever the heck they are in the world.
Can you tell us a little bit about how Catchpoint collects this information? Because the internet is a big place. It's a lot to monitor.
That is a lot to monitor indeed. Fortunately, we've been doing this for a very long time and have done a lot of the instrumentation for you. So if you could first picture a globe with thousands of dots all over it, we call this our observability network of intelligent agents, thousands of agents around the world. And what makes this network of agents extremely unique is the coverage and also the types of coverage. So hundreds and hundreds of those agents sit in the cloud for telemetry at the source. We say in a conversational way, hundreds and hundreds on backbone broadband ISPs to monitor the core internet stack plumbing itself, if you will. Then hundreds and hundreds on the last mile eyeball networks, 5G agents, MEC, etc. And understanding that foundational network set of agents is critical to now answer the question, how do we collect this information? How do we give that visibility? We use that network to run your basic synthetics tests, your internet synthetic tests. Sometimes we say active monitoring, running probes against web, DNS, API trace routes. And then there's also distributed application tracing, BGP monitoring, web page test, and finally, real user telemetry from where those users' devices and networks actually are. So that's kind of how we do it and some of the different ways in which we do it.
So if I'm pulling all of that information into my Catchpoint infrastructure, what are the most common use cases where I can use that data and bring it into my own network performance monitoring?
Hopefully, when we talk about monitoring, it's probably understood that there are core uptime, availability, and performance, like how fast or slow is it? What's the latency? What are my round trip times? How does that round trip time vary given a particular path. But where is that core uptime and performance measured? Telemetry at the edge, right? Your edge may go as far as your cloud or may go even further with things like CDN. But also, it's not just about a static edge like images on S3. We're seeing more and more the need for IPM because of growing functions at the edge. So think Fastly's compute at the edge, Akamai edge workers, etc. So ensuring and optimizing reliability and reach of your ever-growing edge is probably the essential critical use case for IPM. And also, I think another relevant use case would be for network path engineering traffic shaping. So I recall an architect from a Fortune 500 saying, I consider the internet to be a part of our backbone. It's very important to monitor our traffic from our premise to the cloud and back again. So it's really important to do these tests with synthetic monitoring. So with Catchpoint, you can do this for single paths, single endpoints, but also you can do this with what we call mesh testing. You know, an x-axis set of agents continually getting network data from a y-axis set of agents. And I guess it gives you like a checkerboard view of the data between them. So whether it's from your premises or those clouds we mentioned. But anyways, connectivity and shaping, also another core use case for IPM.
In that matrix, I can get a sense of from this point to this point, based on that matrix, exactly what my performance is going to be.
Correct, correct. And trying to explain it without a visual, I was like, it's a checkerboard view.
Yeah. I got it. I know what you're doing. I know what you're saying, Leo.
So we talked about some network metrics, traceroute. I assume I can get things like latency, jitter, drop packets and stuff. But you also go beyond that. You can do synthetic application testing?
Yes, tools for your basic web synthetics, your premium set of capabilities, and what we call internet synthetics, and just kind of be mindful of that network of intelligent agents we mentioned a moment ago. But what we do is run full synthetic transaction monitors for web transactions, API transactions, using Playwright, Puppeteer. And fun fact, a lot of people probably don't know this, but Catchpoint still maintains webpagetest.org for free. So that's for your front-end performance and performance optimization recommendations, things like that.
So WebPage Test is an open source project, but Catchpoint is the patron. Is that what you're saying?
You are correct. So webpagetest.org, founded by Patrick Meenan. We acquired them a couple of years ago. We still maintain the open source project for free. And then we do have, if you want to, some premium set of capabilities within our portal to get additional things like alerting, things like that. Then we do offer competitive pricing packages for WebPage Test Premium. You are correct.
With the synthetic transactions, I could put on my pure cynic hat, Leo, and go, I'm a network engineer. If my network's up and running, I don't care what's going across the pipes. I'm going to deliver your packets. Everything's going to be fine. From my perspective, whatever your synthetic transactions are, not my problem. But that's not actually accurate, Leo, as far as how I should feel about synthetic transactions.
What's that expression? Not my circus, not my monkeys, or something like that. But also we don't want to assume, right? We don't want to assume a network engineer would never care about things like DNS or APIs, right? They very well may be in their purview of responsibilities. But when it comes to transaction monitoring, network metrics are embedded right in because we capture all those metrics in an HTTP transaction, for example, load time, response time, and more importantly, give the AI and analytics on top of it to do things like see those metrics by ISP, geography, by cloud, etc., because those internet stacks are different in different parts of the world. And then another cool thing we do on top of the transactions is we allow you to concurrently run trace routes, including setting an ECN flag, pings, etc., at the same time as those transactions. So, for example, if a path varies, you can answer questions like, does this path with this number of hops correlate to a higher load time? So very powerful stuff.
ECN flag. So you just kind of blew through that acronym there, but I mean, explicit congestion notification. So we were talking on a different show with Catchpoint and got into some details about what the ECN flag is all about and why we care. But when that flag is set, you're being notified as the sender that, hey, upstream from you, there's congestion. You need to slow things down. And then why we would care in a test about setting the ECN flag would be to find out that maybe that flag value is being stripped by the ISP. And so ECN and its ECN as a function, and then the L4S it's supporting is maybe non-functional.
You are correct, right? L4S, low loss, low latency, scalable. And then if it's being stripped or bleached, we sometimes say, but essentially, right, we want it to make things as fast as possible. And that's why I stressed it a couple times, the network of intelligent agents. We get to tell you that because it's got to be supported across the entire path. And if it's gone in even one hop or one leg, then it's gone for the entire path and you lose the benefit. So we're going to help companies be at the forefront of implementing L4 or being ready for L4S, I should say. You are correct. And that's why we do it that way.
I'm curious with the synthetic transactions, because you mentioned earlier, like when we're talking about the internet, there's a lot to it. So if I'm getting, a user might say Azure slow, but with synthetic transactions, could I get more granular? Like, well, it's this region, it's this set of applications, not just the whole cloud is slow.
Yes. So, what comes to mind is we think about granularity and cardinality. So granularity, maybe for the sake of the conversation, I'll say the different levels. So whether it's at the top level, like what are the times for the entire transaction, to the individual steps, to the individual pages, to the individual hosts, to the individual requests on the page, and then to the individual HTTP components of those individual requests.
Oh, wow.
We capture all of those out of the box with the unique ability to allow you to specify an infinitely possible list of custom indicators on top of that.
Okay, so very granular.
Very granular. And then, like I said, the analytics on top. So it'd be like, okay, this cloud versus that cloud, this ISP versus that ISP, this geography versus that geography, and so on.
So that is a lot of data that you're collecting. Are you bringing machine learning or AI into the picture?
Yes, that is a lot of data. So what the heck do you do with it, right? So we do offer native in the UI AI capabilities, but also just a side note, you do have access to real-time webhooks and APIs in case you want to send it to, for example, your own data lake, something like that. But having said that, I'll kind of say that we do have what I would consider to be expected AI capabilities, including the ability to turn mountains of data into molehills of insights, as I like to say, Leo Vasilou, patent pending, identify trend shifts, identify anomalies, surface correlations across those different telemetry types we were speaking about earlier, right? Core expected capabilities. Beyond those, though, there are a couple of powerful, unique ones to discuss. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing any justice. So customers run their own millions and billions of tests. Catchpoint runs their own set of millions and billions of tests to use as a control. So one of the things we use AI for is to take the data from those billions of tests, aggregate them, display a real-time internet-wide health status for all those tests across critical providers, clouds, etc. around the world. Not just for providers and clouds you are using, and we call this internet sonar. And so if there's an incident, it lets you answer questions like, is it me? Is it something else? Is it regional? Is it global? Right? And then the other unique AI capability that we have is, let's see, if you're familiar with the concept of a service map from like a backend application APM vernacular, what we do is automatically create that topological view of your app, your network dependencies. It doesn't matter if it's first party, third party, internal, external. But anyway, we create those architectures, dependencies, interaction views, but for your front end. And that's the unique bit of this. And so if you see a problem in this stack map, which is what we call it, then click and drill down to see what the heck is going on. Drill down into, is it something with the app? Is it something with a underlying network or ISP, so on and so forth. So those are a couple of the unique things that we do with AI and ML.
So internet sonar, that's sort of like my global health view of the broader internet and the major components of it.
It is. And, it gets to a point where customers are customers, but they themselves, going back to what I was saying earlier about how Catchpoint has done a lot of the instrumentation for you. So what we've done is we've taken our own set of control tests so customers can look at their data, compare it to our control, just to get a better understanding, hopefully hasten troubleshooting, triage when something goes from green to red, right? Triage being the idea of you determining, is it T0, T1, T through priority, etc. But otherwise, correct.
So you're giving me a general baseline, and I can compare that to my own specific tests and see how we're comparing and where the issues might be.
And to answer those questions, is it me? Is it something else? Is it both of them? Regional, global? Right.
Leah, we've been talking about IPM, Internet Performance Monitoring, as a category because all of a sudden it's popped up as an official thing insofar as Gartner makes things official when they release Magic Quadrants and so on. So that's what's happened here, right? IPM has become this official product category.
Yes. Their first ever quadrant for digital experience monitoring, internet performance monitoring. And I look at it as a reinforcement of the need to solve some of the problems we've been discussing and to have some of the capabilities we've been discussing. So it's nice to finally see IPM get the recognition it deserves. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time, and I wish they would have done it sooner, but I guess better late than never.
And presumably Catchpoint is in this Gartner MQ.
Yes, you are correct. Pleased to say that Catchpoint was named a leader in this quadrant. So very proud moment for us.
Yeah, it's always a big deal, and I understand why. So if folks are, their interest has been piqued by this conversation and they want to learn more about Catchpoint, where should they go?
Please visit us at catchpoint.com/techbytes.
Oh, okay, that's very easy. Catchpoint.com/techbytes. Catchpoint is all one word. TechBytes is all one word. Well, Leo, thank you for joining us for this conversation, and thanks to Catchpoint for being a sponsor. Sponsors help enable us to do what we do here at Packet Pushers, which is try to provide you with the best free technical content on networking, IT, security, cloud, DevOps, and more to help you as a professional. If you're interested in finding out more about Packet Pushers, head on over to packetpushers.net, where we've got tons more content, more podcasts, more blogs. You can follow us on LinkedIn. We're on Blue Sky at Packet Pushers, and you can hear us on Spotify. And if you would, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts because it helps. And last but not least, remember that too much networking would never be enough.